I was sitting 10 feet from the dispatch console when the 911 call crackled through trespasser at Silver Pine Lake, possibly armed, refusing to leave HOA property. The dispatcher read the address like it was any other complaint, and I felt my jaw lock because that was my lake on my deeded land, and I was the county's volunteer fire chief. So the call was coming straight into my office while the caller, Karen Whitfield, had no idea I was listening. Yeah, that happened. My name's Jake Walker. Third generation on a 640-acre ranch in Redwood County, Montana, with a 12-acre spring-fed lake right in the middle. Granddad dug the irrigation ditches with a shovel and a stubborn back. Dad stocked trout in the 70s and taught me to swim by tying a rope to the dock and saying, "Hold on." And kick these days. I run 100 head. Fix fence until my hands split drink coffee from a dented percolator that could stand a spoon straight up. And most mornings, the air smells like pine pitch and diesel, and everything is quiet. Until quiet meets covenants and people who think paperwork is a crowbar. 5 years ago, the parcel to the east got carved into Silver Pine Estates, 12 near identical houses, with big porches for people who like the idea of Montana, without the mud. The HOA formed before the paint dried. And 2 weeks after Karen became president, a certified letter as thick as a phone book landed in my mailbox, demanding a 5-foot trail across my pasture to the lake, plus seasonal dock rights. 30 days to comply, threats of legal action sprinkled like pepper all over the page. You know what I mean. I didn't throw the letter in a fire. I paid for a surveyor, and a title attorney drove to the county records office and asked questions with my hat in my hands. There was no easement then, and there had never been one. I sent the proof back to her, polite as a Sunday handshake, and she didn't apologize. She pivoted. A week later, I walked out of the barn and found Karen leading 3 board members and a neon-vested surveyor 200 yards past my gate, tripods in the gravel. Like they owned the place, I told them. This is private property, and the loafers guy nodded along with her. Like a bobblehead, Karen said, "We're on the disputed boundary. Our surveyor has every right to verify." I kept my voice low. "Your surveyor is trespassing. Leave now, or I'm calling the sheriff." She lifted her phone and smiled that syrupy smile and said, "Go ahead, we're documenting your harassment." I took photos of faces and plates, turned around, and went back to work. I wasn't going to give her a clip for Facebook. Laura Green. My attorney sent a cease and desist and filed an ethics complaint the out-of-state. Surveyor disavowed the whole thing in writing, said Karen. Misrepresented the ownership. You'd think that would cool it. It didn't. Next came the reputation hour, a private HOA post claiming, "I threatened violence, and the sheriff protected me because I'm part of some good old boys club." My wife Emily saw it on a screenshot. 50+ comments from strangers calling me aggressive and unfit to be fire chief. I felt that slow burn in my jaw and told Emily, "Let her dig the hole. We'll measure it later." Then I set a wildlife camera near the back gate because paper trails and timestamps beat opinions every single day. 48 hours later, I got a tour. I never asked for health department for an anonymous sewage complaint. Lane. Department of Environmental Quality for algae and illegal watering cleaner than state standards. Zoning for alleged unpermitted fishing tours, ma'am. My tour is me and a thermos, and it's free. Protocol is protocol. No violation. I filed requests for the complaints, and when the records came back, the names were blacked out, but the email domains weren't. Each one from silverpinehoa.org anonymous wasn't so anonymous. and I started building a timeline binder with photos, reports, and dates because patterns are persuasive. Then came the call. I told you about the one that started this. I was in the station office when the radio cracked trespasser at Silver Pine Lake, possibly armed Rhonda. The dispatcher cross-checked the county map and said, "Ma'am, records show that lake is on private land owned by Jake Walker." "Are you certain about the location?" Karen's voice tightened, "Send a deputy." Sheriff Tom Baylor radioed he was 3 minutes out and told dispatch to log the call unfounded and flag false reporting. I sat 10 feet away, listening to a lie meant to send someone with a badge to remove me from my own property. And I knew then she wasn't just willing to bend truth, she was willing to break it. That night, I turned my dining table into a wall of paper covenants, plat maps incorporated, HOA minutes, old marketing brochures, and somewhere around midnight, after the coffee went cold and Emily brought me a fresh cup and a raised eyebrow, I found the hinge. Everything swung on Section 7. 3 of their covenants promised homeowners exclusive recreational access to Silver Pine Lake as secured by permanent easement, and a county decision from 2019 showed the developer North Star Homes applied for that easement and got denied. After I objected, they built anyway, sold anyway, put a telephoto picture of my lake in the brochure with a caption that made it look like it was theirs. And then I found HOA minutes approving $50,000 to pursue adverse possession and easement by necessity to protect the HOA from homeowner claims. In plain speech, they needed my lake to keep from getting sued for a promise. They never had the right to make. That was the twist. She wasn't chasing a morning swim. She was trying to manufacture a history to cover a lie. The next morning, I slid a folder across a diner booth to Sheriff Baylor while he worked on a cinnamon roll the size of a hubcap. He said, "We could charge the false report and write it then," I said. "Small potatoes, Sheriff. I want the kind of case that explains itself to anyone with eyes and ears." Nodded slow and straight. Then I walked to Laura's office and she sketched a plan on a yellow pad, like she'd been waiting for this storm. 3 prongs countersue the HOA for harassment, trespass, defamation, and intentional infliction. Seek $75,000 and fees, file a bar complaint on their lawyer for frivolous claims, and send the developer a letter showing their exposure. If owners sued, then politely suggest they send a corrective letter admitting there was never lake access. Meanwhile, I called my dad, Frank, and asked if he still kept fishing logs. He grinned. 37 notebooks since 1984 dates and weather, and what bit and what didn't. You want to see a lifetime of mornings, put it on paper. 2 days later, the line got crossed so hard you could hear it snap. A dozen head hung near the trough. Heads low. One heifer, drooling like syrup. Doc Reardon tested the water and came back grim. Ethylene glycol, antifreeze. Not runoff, poured the trough. Is fed by a spring that slips under the county road, through a culvert anyone could reach from the HOA side. I tucked a camera in the brush that afternoon and waited at 2:17 a.m. A white Tesla rolled up without lights. A headlamp figure stepped out with a plastic jug crouched at the culvert. Poured turned, and the beam lit her face for a heartbeat. Karen, I copied the footage to 2 thumb drives and a cloud folder and drove to the sheriff. The warrant turned up a half-empty jug, same brand. Doc named a sticky funnel-stained gloves in a bag. Sheriff's jaw worked like he was chewing gravel. Poisoning livestock is a felony. Jake up to 10 years. Do we arrest now or wait? I took a breath and said, "Wait." Let her walk into the room confident, and let the truth do its job. Laura said a county mediation asked the county attorney to observe and subpoenaed 3 HOA board members who signed checks the night before the meeting. A young TV reporter aired a story that started as Karen's David and Goliath pitch and turned after he read my folder. So by morning, the county conference room smelled like old carpet and coffee, and every seat was full. I sat in clean jeans and a pressed shirt and boots. I'd polished for my dad more than the room Erin sat across. In full makeup, her lawyer's tie wouldn't sit straight. The sheriff stood at the back, the court reporter's keys tapped like a metronome, and the commissioner opened with thank yous. "With respect," I said, "I'm not here to negotiate access to land that isn't for sale. I'm here to put the last 6 months on a screen, so nobody pretends not to understand." Clip 1. Trespass with tripods. 200 yards past my gate, me saying, "This is private property. Leave now, or I'm calling the sheriff." Timestamps sharp enough to shave. Clip 2. The gate lock at 6:15 a.m. The headlamp, her voice in the dark. Let's see. Him reach his back section. Now, a board member covered her face. Clip 3. The 911 audio, HOA common area. Possibly armed then. Rhonda's correction. And that beat of silence that tells the truth better than I can. A slide with the complaint timeline and the Silver Pine HOA emails. Then the motive covenant, section 7.3, the 2019 denial. The HOA minutes authorizing $50,000 to chase adverse possession. The brochure with my lake described like a private oasis, bought with the price of a house. And finally the felony, the culvert footage, the Tesla, the headlamp, the face, the vet report, the warrant return, and the room leaned toward the screen like gravity shifted. The commissioner asked if I wanted to press charges. The county attorney looked over her glasses. I said yes on the poisoning and the false report on trespass and harassment. I looked at the board and said, "I'm listening." Laura stood with a voice light as ordering lunch, immediate removal of Ms. Whitfield as HOA president, a public apology and correction payment of my legal fees. "Drop the civil suit. The criminal case moves forward," Karen whispered at her lawyer, looked at me with tears making tracks in her makeup and said, "We were promised. It's not fair." Sheriff stepped forward without drama. "Ms. Whitfield, you're under arrest for felony poisoning of livestock and filing a false emergency report. You have the right to remain silent." The cuffs clicked like a clock, finding the hour. And 2 deputies walked her out. The board stepped into the hallway, came back pale. "We accept your terms," and that was that. Walking into the October sun, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, tired, and steady, because I didn't raise my voice. I raised the evidence, and sometimes that's the only language bullies respect. And here's where I'll leave.